Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's episode, we have a very sad topic, especially for a few of us in this group, and that is Ronald Acuna Jr. has tore his ACL again and is out for the remainder of the 2024 MLB season. So we want to discuss, one, like what our thoughts are on this injury, what cards we have, as well if this will deter us and how we're currently buying cards of other active players. On this episode, it's me, Scott, Phil, Jeff, and Chris. Ty is not here. He is also a Braves fan and an Acuna fan, so I know he is not a big fan either. But let's just jump into this. Chris, give us your thoughts. I just want to hear your thoughts as a Braves fan and a Acuna super collector, would you say, right? Major Acuna collector in general.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. For those of us watching, I want you to just keep an eye on Scott's face while I talk. Scott's like some sort of like sociopathic monster who feeds on other people's sadness. So just watch a ear to ear smile. He's sort of the Pennywise of our group, and what you're gonna see is haunting, and just don't ever forget it, okay? Because he's coming for you next.
Let me defend myself after that. Chris thinks I hate Acuna. He thinks I hate him so bad, and so he thinks I'm like getting off on this injury. So I'm laughing at Chris, not at Acuna tearing his ACL. I promise.
Okay. It's important we specify what specifically Scott is laughing at. Anyway, so my initial thoughts are obviously that I feel like I've been kicked in the stomach and testicles at the exact same time by the biggest horse in the world. It's awful. It's terrible. If you had as a Braves fan, the season has been the worst case scenario. Like, I don't know, if someone told me that we would lose Strider or Acuna, I would have probably been like, well, all right, maybe one. That would be terrible luck. But how do we lose two? And 2 months of Sean Murphy, and Riley is hurt, and he has 3 home runs on Memorial Day. It's terrible. It stinks. It's a real crap season so far. Obviously, anything can happen going forward. But if you're an Acuna holder, as I am, as Jeff is, if you're an Acuna wax collector like Phil is, this stinks. I think we have to legitimately look at ourselves in the mirror and ask this question: will Acuna's prices ever get back to where they were yesterday or 2 days ago? And I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I'm afraid that the answer to that question is no. Jeff, what do you think?
Yes, I have to agree with that. And it's sad to think of it that way, but I know we've talked about on this show as well as on Blabbin' About Slabbin'. Last year, he had one of the best years in modern baseball history, right? Just statistically. And it was outrageous how few of his cards actually had any noticeable bump. Granted, the card market in general was down, but specifically his card market, a lot of cards were down from preseason to his historic MVP. And we talked about why that was. And repeatedly, I said, well, the fans, collectors have to see it twice. They've got to see him stay healthy for another full season to know that it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a Vlad Jr. near MVP season. And I think that's what's going to happen now, except it's even worse. So what does he do when he comes back? Even if he comes back and wins the MVP, are his cards ever going to see this value? Maybe he's got to win 2 MVPs now. He's got to show 2 full seasons of that. So as far as card values, no, I don't see any scenario in the near future where they reach these levels, which is really disappointing.
So
the second. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I have a question for you. So when Acuna got hurt in 2021, was it 21 when he was by far the MVP favorite, in my opinion? Yep. Bryce Harper ended up winning it, but I think if Acuna would have been healthy that year, he would have won MVP. He was amazing, and he was way ahead of the pack that year. When that happened, I expected his cards to go down because of just natural things, missing almost a year, right? He'll come back later next season, and whatever. They didn't drop. That didn't even send them down at the time. And I thought that was interesting. If anything, right after the injury, these cards actually went up, and they've kind of stayed flat there ever since. So do we think we're going to finally see that drop after an injury at age 26, or do we think they might remain consistent? I know that sounds silly because obviously he's hurt, but do we think that his popularity can maintain at least a majority of the price?
Phil, you want to chime in first?
Yeah. back in November, December, we were talking about how, as Jeff raised, the prices didn't go up last year really, or at least as much as they should have. Maybe they stayed flat while a lot of other players are going down. So relatively, they might have done okay. But you would have thought you would have seen more of a pop after a 9-war season, 40-70. But you didn't really see that. And then we were kind of balking at the, whatever you want to call it, card community, hobbyists at whole, like you guys are undervaluing Acuna. This isn't right. Like, what does he have to show it a second time in order for his prices to go up? Like, that's kind of dumb. Well, it turns out that maybe he was fairly priced the whole time. And maybe it's not a situation where we should have given him the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh, he'll clearly do it again. No, maybe the hobby needed to see him do it for 2 consecutive years after 2021, lost 2022, and now a lost 2024, 50 or so games where he pretty much sucked. And hopefully his lower body doesn't sap his power again next year, which I know Scott's probably already thought about, and maybe you guys have too. Hopefully we don't see 2 lost seasons on top of 1.5 other lost seasons. Like, that would suck. So will his cards come down? Yeah, they will. I mean, I think he's down. Well, I was looking at one card, about 50% over the last 2 years, even after last year. And that's not including any comps after the, the injury news, I don't believe. So yeah, he's going to come down more, and he can't stay relevant if he's not playing. And I guess on the bright side, he might earn his 2nd World Series ring this year. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, speaking of that, it's interesting. And Chris, I want to hear your thoughts as a Braves fan. With these devastating injuries, the Braves are still 30-20. Like, you're not – like, it could be so much worse. So as a Braves fan, do you still have hope for another World Series run, or you kind of lost it on 2024?
I mean, the idea that it could be worse, I can't imagine how it could be worse. I mean, there's still, like, the roster they have is so deep that they were able to withstand losing their best pitcher, arguably one of the 3 best pitchers in baseball for the whole season. They probably can withstand losing Acuna and still make the playoffs. And then at that point, it's a complete crapshoot, what happens in October. So, yeah, their season's not over. I mean, for the next couple of days, I mean, if you played fantasy baseball, I hope you picked up the national starter for today. I should have done it. I looked at it last night, Jeff, and I was like, nah. But I mean, it seemed like it's the most obvious great outing of the season. Like, there's no one on that offense was going to get up for today's game. There's nothing Ozuna and Darno could do to get the energy going. And last I looked, I think it was like 8-0, which is not surprising. But yeah, sure, they could definitely still win the World Series. I don't think they'll be making trades like they did in 2021, just because so much of the roster is set. But a lot of the pressure, not the right word, but it's going to be time for Kelenic. He's going to get a full-time chance. He's going to face lefties. He's going to play every day. And if he's ever going to take that step, this is the time. Like, this is definitely the time. So hopefully, Jeff's Kelenic collection can be sort of a side beneficiary of this absolute disaster that we're looking at. I don't know. But yeah, the season's not over by any stretch.
Right. And I just want to say that apart from card values and fantasy baseball issues, which are substantial for guys like us, it's also a huge blow for baseball. And we felt a similar blow when Trout got hurt. We don't know how long he's going to be out, but it's just the game is so much better for all baseball fans when these superstars are out there, when you can go to the park and see them. And just so many have gotten hurt. And we talked about the litany of pitcher injuries already several times on this show, but we're not even through May. And here's another superstar that's done for. So it's sad for the whole baseball community, even those that aren't involved in the hobby at all.
Well, not the whole baseball community, Jeff. It's sad for 99.9999999% of the baseball community. There are some outliers, which of course we won't name. I will say, like, the thing that gets me like sick, I start looking at it and I do sort of legitimately feel nauseous. When I look at what's happened to Acuna over the last 5 years, and Jeff and I talked about this on our Blabbing About Slabbing live that we did. These last 5 seasons, 3 have now been wrecked by injury, 1 wrecked by COVID, and 1 full, healthy 162 game season where he was, one of the best players we've ever seen. So that's 4 lost seasons in his age 22 to age 26. And even assuming he can come back from 2 different ACL surgeries, like on each knee, he would be the Megan Rapinoe of Major League Baseball if he's able to do that. So I was looking. There's not a lot of examples of professional athletes that maintain their form after 2 of these. It's a real short list, and she's probably the highest one on there. Like, I think a lot of these big round career numbers are now, and I hate to say this, like they're not possible anymore.
Mhm.
And that's a huge bummer.
Do any of you have knee issues?
No.
Phil, knee issues. I've had knee issues. They've actually gotten a lot better. But when I was playing basketball, my knees would hurt, right? And they would it's a horrible feeling. And Acuna, when they were asking him about this injury before he had the MRI and it was revealed that he actually tore his ACL, he was like, no, it's more similar to my sprain in this year compared to this injury in this year. And like, he's had so many other knee issues outside of just tearing his ACL that's what concerns me the most. And his sprint speed has dropped from 99th percentile all the way down to, he's getting close. I think he's 54th percentile this year before his injury. And so knees are something that you don't want to mess up. It's really unfortunate because all the load, all the speed that could be hurt drastically by knees.
Yeah, when he comes back, I would assume there's going to be some changes. I would guess if I'm running the team, which I am not, thankfully for the Braves, I'm switching him and Kelnick. Like, he's going to left, Kelnick's going to right, and like the freewheeling on the bases is got to stop. Like, I hate to say it, but he can't be that player anymore.
That's what happened to Trout. Once he tore his thumb ligament and a lot of his injuries came from running the bases, they told him stop stealing. Even though Trout still has 99th percentile speed, they made him stop. And then this year he started to steal again, and then he hurt something, tore his meniscus. That's what it was. So like, it might be correlated. And it's unfortunate. I was actually looking at some stats on Twitter about all the players that had this many home runs and this many stolen bases through their age 26 season. And it was Mike Trout and Ronald Acuna Jr., both of which have just been absolutely destroyed by injuries, which is horrible. I have a question. Before I change the subject slightly, anybody want to add anything else?
Yeah, Phil, I think I cut you off.
Yeah. So with Acuna, he re-injured his already repaired right knee in, was it spring training?
Yeah, he had a little irritation.
This time it's his left knee. Okay. So, but the right knee was probably already bothering him, hence the slippage in speed.
Yep.
And then he hurts his
He
left
may have been
knee,
overcompensating. Doing it.
What a dumbass.
The thing that it's especially frustrating when you watch the play he got hurt on, like, it's just typical stuff he likes to do. He's always looking for like a little advantage. And the catcher was like lollygagging these throws back. And he's like, well, I'll just steal third on a throwback to the pitcher, like I'm in Little League. And then thought better of it. And now his season's over.
Yeah. And one more thing I'd like to add that is another change probably when he comes back is they're going to have to say, you got to stop playing year round. And it's unfortunate because he loves baseball so much. And it's fun to see the winter updates of him playing. I believe Chris said he only played home games for Venezuela, but he was still playing. He still had his body prepped all through the winter. And you got to figure at some point that takes a toll on the joints, especially. So I feel like somebody's going to have to talk to him and say, listen, we got to prioritize. And if Major League Baseball is your priority, then we're going to have to lay off those winter league games.
Yeah, he's not getting $20 million to play in Venezuela in the winter. So I think he's that's going to stop, unfortunately.
So speaking of getting paid $20 million, you know how he signed that contract and everyone's like, man, what a steal. Well, it might have turned out good for Acuna because he's getting paid, had that financial security, even though he missed 2 seasons right in his prime. So
yeah, that's the risk reward game, signing early. You're guaranteed the money when things go wrong.
So it's interesting to see. But yeah, so my other question was going to be, is this why he's been just really not great this year? About league average, he has 0.1 baseball reference WAR, about 1.2 Fangraphs WAR, maybe a little bit less than that now after yesterday because he got caught stealing after he was injured. So that hurts your BSR. But do you think this injury was building and that's why he was performing poorly and the Braves mismanaged it and he was just like, no, I can play? Or do you think it was just something that was a freak thing that could have happened at any time if he would have been rested appropriately?
I think it's a freak thing. I really do. I don't think he would have been out there if he was really hurting. Like, the roster's deep enough where if he was in pain, they would know. He doesn't, like, if you watch him every day like I do, like, he's very dramatic. He doesn't have Snickers made fun of him for having a not a great pain tolerance. And if they thought there was any issue, they would have shut him down for a week. So I think he felt completely fine. He was just he's just off and having a hard time getting himself out of it.
I was hoping that this injury was just him being dramatic because I thought there was a good chance that was the case, right? It was just a
Same.
slight knee sprain and be out for a couple days, maybe a week or two.
Yeah, when he walked off the field, I had positive hopes.
Yeah, because I actually compared it to his other injury. He even said that the other injury, like it was significantly different, which is interesting to see how knee injuries can differ with pain, like with actual pain that it causes. But yeah, I actually do think, Jeff, you brought up an excellent point with playing year round, especially as you age, you need time to rest. And I do wonder, we saw, was it Ronnie Mauricio? Is that who it was for the Mets that tore his ACL in Dominican ball? I think this is going to be something like we saw it with the World Baseball Classic because it was going harder earlier than normal and people got hurt. I wonder if there's going to be more stipulations from teams to say, don't do anything like that at all, ever, outside of Major League Baseball.
I would think so. So I have a question for Phil and for Jeff, and only for Phil and Jeff. Phil, your 2018 wax, and Jeff, your Acuna stuff, like, what are your initial thoughts? Like, do you have plans do you think you're going to try to move it now or hold it for longer and see if he comes back? What are you guys leaning towards?
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah. So if I had Topps Chrome, the stuff without Juan Soto in it, with the Acuna stuff, you've got Series 2, you've got Topps Chrome that doesn't have Juan Soto in it. That stuff is obviously more at risk. Where you've got all three, Ohtani, Acuna, and Soto, the way it kind of works is how you think it would. So if Acuna drops 50% from today, he represents about 33% of the value of that product. So then you take like a 16-17% hit off the wax. I will not be panic selling my wax. I don't have a whole lot of Topps Chrome. Most of the stuff I have either has just Ohtani in it or all three, although I do have some Series 2. Been trying to pick up more, but it hasn't really worked out, but that's okay. Where it comes to single cards of Acuna, that's where I might try to sell one of the big 2 cards I've left. But with the wax, I felt like it's already underpriced. Like, I think it's a super generational year that's not getting the credit to be super generational. Like, I think it's already built in that one of these 3 guys won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer anyways. So because of that, I'm less likely to sell at today's prices anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right there. I don't have the extensive wax collection that Phil does, but I've been trying to pile up my 2018 stuff, and I'm going to hold on to it. Like Phil, I don't think it was overly priced before. So we'll see. I mean, that might be something in the off season during this inevitable incoming dip that I might look at to pick more up. But as far as individual cards, I think I've got to look at divesting from some of it because it's just an opportunity cost. When you look at where else you could have that money, I posed the question to Chris on our live last night. I was just trying to ballpark similar cards, similar values in my head. And we were talking about if you'd rather have either the black or the Independence Day Acuna or say a Gatorade bath, a PSA 8 Gatorade bath Soto. And like, would you make those trades straight up? And I probably would right now. So those kind of thoughts lead me to think that I should try to get rid of some of the bigger cards that I have. And maybe at some point look to get back in. Like I said, I don't feel like prices are going to go up anytime soon. So that's where I'm at.
I'm going to answer your question, Chris, but from a different perspective. I know you said I couldn't, but I'm going to. One thing I want to say, Chris thinks if you don't have someone's cards, you hate them. I don't hate Acuna and I don't hate Ohtani. Just because I don't have their cards doesn't mean I hate them. But with that being said, player I have loved collecting is Mike Trout. And at some point with injuries, I started to slowly sell them because it's not very much fun when they're not playing anyways. And also you can feel them kind of just the wind going out of the sails of that particular player. So if it was me, I would keep the really cool, actually special rare stuff, right? Like a Bowman Chrome Autograph Gold. I'd probably keep that. But I probably would sell the stuff that isn't quite as special.
All right. I'm going to make it. You could argue and say that Trout is a different player than Acuna because of what Trout had accomplished before the injury set in. Trout has already made it, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Where if he doesn't do anything for the rest of his career, that's kind of okay. And I think that has to be the mindset if you're buying Trout stuff now. You can't really expect much more. And that could be fine based on the prices where you buy in. But I see what you're saying, Scott. But where I'm going with this is, and I'm not saying that's necessarily true, that Trout made it and Acuna's just a guy. What do you guys think about Acuna long-term now? 28 WAR through his age 26 season, will be 27th season, 27th year next year when he comes back. Is this a guy that you still feel bullish about long term? Like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, are people still going to want this guy?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say it's hard to say because his game doesn't necessarily translate to one that ages well. His hustle and intensity on the bases versus somebody maybe like Soto, who doesn't take the extra base, who isn't crazy on defense. So that gives me pause, especially with the lower body injuries. So I don't know if we can think that he's got 10 good years when he comes back on his repaired knees. If you did believe that, then I would see a chance to be bullish on him. I'm just not there yet. So I think we've talked about this in some of our chats before, that he might be the type of guy who remains collectible, even though he's not a huge round number guy, or maybe he doesn't even get to the Hall of Fame, but still is collectible for being a fan favorite for some of the stuff he's done. But I don't think my long-term outlook on him isn't as rosy as somebody like Trout, as you said, just because of what Trout's already accomplished.
Yeah, I think, Phil, you asked two separate questions. The first, am I bullish on Acuna for the next 10 years? No, unfortunately, I can't be. Someone with 2 repaired knees, that's asking a lot. He'll probably be a DH by the time he's like, if let's assume he can come back. Let's just assume he's able to completely come back. I'm guessing he'll be a DH by no later than 33. And even probably in his 31, 32, he's probably DHing 60. Yeah, assuming, again, he's full health. At that point, he's probably DHing a third of the time, just to spare the legs, any wear and tear. But yeah, I mean, he's not gonna coast into the Hall of Fame on his WAR. That was never gonna be a thing. But the one thing he has is people do like him. His personality is great. The hype around him is always big, and he does have the capability of putting up absolutely insane seasons. Mm-hmm. So for him to continue being long-term collectible, he's going to have to return and just do some amazing stuff. In our live, we had comps come up in the chat. Someone said I said Eric Davis. He's starting to remind me a little bit like Eric Davis, just an absolutely incredible amount of talent, but his body just couldn't contain it really in a way. Someone else said Andrew McCutchen, I think, Jeff, a guy that had one MVP season, some really, really good seasons, but just local fan favorite, but is not going to make the Hall of Fame. And sadly, 10 years after his retirement, people aren't going to talk about him too much. Another name that I think, and I hate to say this, but I do think there's a potential comparison, is Bo Jackson, a guy like a human highlight that put up some incredible numbers, and then his body just betrayed him, largely due to his own athleticism and that one asshole who tackled him weird on the Bengals, I think it was.
Yeah, I would say if he can't come back from this, yes, then that'd be a good comp.
I actually think more optimistically about the situation than you are, Chris, believe it or not, because he's had seasons that none of those players have ever touched. Even Andrew McCutchen's MVP year was nowhere near what Acuna did. That 40-70 is huge for his legacy. I am a lot more optimistic long-term, and that's probably because I don't have skin in the game, which helps. But no, I think there's a real world where he comes back and he won't steal, but he might be able to be a good base runner still. I don't know. I'm not nearly as pessimistic. It's going to suck. He's not going to be able to be an all-time great. I don't think he will be. But a Braves fan favorite, if you say their his whole career, on top of that, he has great, big energy right now, plus the big season he already had. I think he could absolutely. We've seen what his offensive upside is compared to those other players. I think he could be a great DH through his mid-30s, if that's what the worst case is. So for me, I think statistically and culturally, he'll be much more important than every one of those players besides
I don't know. Bo Jackson.
Well, I said that. I said besides Bo Jackson.
Okay.
What I said.
30 years after retirement.
I meant Eric Davis and Andrew McCutchen from a baseball perspective. Bo Jackson played 2 sports. He's not really comparable in that sense to Acuna. I think Acuna is going to have a better career than those other players, even with the lost years. It sucks he lost one during COVID, but I don't know.
If you want to talk about another bullish, because we've been, kind of doom and gloomy on this one. Another bullish sign for Acuna might be we talk about how age is huge in the hobby, and once a guy reaches 25, all the prospectors are kind of already done with that guy and have moved on. So a lot of the flippers with short time horizons with Acuna probably already sold when he was 24 or 25. Now he's 26, not a spring chicken anymore. So it would take a lot for his stuff to come down 50%. I made that comment earlier as like a hypothetical. I don't know if he'll see 50% from last week's prices. I don't know if it'll get that bad, but I'm also not promising it won't. So
my thoughts though, Phil. So what I've noticed with some players who get injured, you would expect their cards to drop more than they do. I think Acuna's drop is going to happen if he comes back next season and he's bad, not because of the injury. I think people still love Acuna and they like Acuna. I think his play in 2024, what year is it next? 2025 is a lot more important than this season for his values, in my opinion. So I still think there's hope.
If only Royce Lewis could get treated the same way.
Royce Lewis, come on. I think Phil's also.
Let's just pause. Everybody, just wait till this guy comes back, all right? So I can sell my cards.
Hey, yeah, there you go. And you can even compare him to Buxton with like the potential, but Acuna, again, he's done so much. These other players who've had these problems have never touched. And he's had those 9 WAR seasons. He had a 9 Fangraphs WAR season, which is incredible. That does not happen often. And I do think even if without the speed, he's going to be able to put up 5 WAR seasons relatively easily, 4 to 5 WAR seasons with his bat.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I did. My wife gave me like a psychological evaluation today. We were trying to go through what phase of like sadness I'm in, or what phase of what is the term,
Grief.
Jeff? Grief. Thank you.
Stages of grief. Yeah.
Stages of grief. That's what it is. Yeah. So I'm 100% in the depression stage right now. Anger was lengthy, but I really think on some level I haven't fully explained what this is yet. But yeah, I mean, I maybe I'll get more bullish later. Right now, it's just more sad than anything else. It's hard to think about, the future. Someone wants to give me a list of professional athletes that have two different knees, fully repaired like this and returned to something close to what they were. I would like to know what that list is.
So let's talk about Hall of Fame. Do we think Acuna is going to be held to a different standard with the Hall of Fame than other players due to missing essentially 3 seasons of his prime with injury as well as COVID? Like, do we think he needs to get to 60, 70 WAR, or do you think they might be able to get him in with 50 to 55?
The problem is he's pissing away so many of his prime years to be able to have that peak performance.
Yeah.
That, say, Sandy Koufax had, or
even
he needs another
Buffett.
40-70 or something close to it, right? If he doesn't get there from a cumulative career-long like WAR standpoint, and he's pissed away 2 to 4 years of his prime already, basically, and that's so hard. Where's the good season going to come from? I don't know.
Yeah, it's really, he's not going to get in. Like, I mean, I don't think 60 WAR is just they open the door and in you go. But I don't. He's not going to get in on his WAR. Like, he's gonna, if he comes back and he's healthy, he's going to have to pump some pretty big home run numbers. Like, he's just going to have some big seasons, some big postseason moments. I mean, guys can get in without huge WAR numbers, but he's got an uphill battle right now. Like Phil said, I mean, these 4 seasons are right, when he's supposed to be compiling. Like, I mean, Soto has been compiling. Sometimes it's not as flashy, but he's missed out on a lot of stats that he should have now.
And the positive spin is like Phil said, when we're talking about prime, people have said, well, typically, historically, prime has been 26, 27 through 33. Okay, great. But he's got a lot of wear and tear on that body from playing professionally since he was 18, pretty much year round. So I don't think we can just assume that he's going to come back and have 7 or 8 prime years left, like a quote unquote normal major leaguer might.
Yeah. We had some people in our chat last night, Jeff. We're like, well, when he comes back, all he has to do is he'll average 30 plus homers for the next 12 years. And we're like, I mean, I'll take it. If you want to tell me that that's going to happen, I'll be really excited. But I don't know.
It can't be a given.
No, I don't think there's anything we can assume at this point.
So I just showed his stats, and they're down now. But he's had 2 seasons over 40 home runs.
Yep.
He's led the league twice in stolen bases. He's led the league in OPS plus. He's done a lot of great things. So we'll see what happens. But I think he could reinvent himself as a pure slugger and focus on that, and that could become who he is. And we could see some big power numbers. it's tough because of the double knee replacement. Sorry, the double ACL injury on both knees. But
Yeah,
I
maybe
don't
he
know.
becomes David Ortiz and plays till he's 41 and just hits bombs.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. That's
Yeah.
a great end of the spectrum.
I'll take that.
You know, I'll take it all day.
Was I more optimistic than you expected, Chris? Because I feel like I was more optimistic than everybody else here.
No, because I think you're right. You're more objective.
Yeah.
You don't have skin in the game. It's not as hard to be.
Like this is.
I mean, the nicest way to say is you really don't care. So I mean, it's very easy to be optimistic when it doesn't mean anything to you.
Well, I care about baseball, and I care about, players who are good for baseball. But I don't know. It's tough. So it's interesting though. Let's talk about one more thing. This episode, we want to wrap it up pretty quick here. But Soto, Tatis, Guerrero, and Acuna. Those were the big four from 2018 and 2019. And Ohtani, of course. But when everything was going crazy in 2018 to 2020, Ohtani hadn't been Ohtani yet, really, besides his rookie year. So Soto, Tatis, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Ronald Acuna Jr., all four of those players, only Soto's really standing out as like he's still on that great track. Is that surprising to anybody? Would you have guessed this turns out how it was? Is this just an example of what to be careful with in sports cards? Like, is this a warning? Like, what do you think about that type of situation?
Understand your risk. All those other guys had fat, stupid, and reckless almost. Maybe that's unfair with Acuna, but Soto's play, there's just less that could go wrong with him. I mean, this is a guy that last year he played all 162 games. Now you could also say like, well, he hasn't taken the contract yet, and that could separate him from Tatis and Acuna, but I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Acuna may be playing different because he already had the bag secured. Maybe not, but I don't know. Soto, to me, he stood out as a guy that was more mature than most guys in his situation, and I think that's translated well for him from the beginning, even with the shimmy. I still thought he was more mature than a lot of people gave him credit for.
I agree, Phil.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised because of all the things Phil mentioned, but it's amazing how many people in the hobby have just been crapping on Soto, especially when he had his slow starts and just how boring of a player he is and how nobody likes guys that just walk and don't hit. And I feel like they weren't giving him enough credit for the mature approach he had at the plate. And like Phil said, he doesn't play the same way that some of those other guys do, and he's no Vlad. So, Chris, what do you think?
I think it's amazing that in 2019, the best rookie in that class is going to end up being Kyle Tucker. I don't think that was anything any of us would have bet on at the time. Even now, doesn't seem like anyone wants to
No one cares.
Bet. Yeah, I mean, and like Jeff and I mean, we talk about this all the time, but you're investing in people, and
yes,
we get constant like reminders of this. Phil said stupid, reckless, yeah, all that stuff. I mean, Tatis and the motorcycle, that was probably a red flag that we all should, immediately have been aware of. We get the Wander Franco situation. I mean, valuable baseball cards can evaporate into thin air in the absolute blink of an eye. These are just cards of people, and they're only as valuable as the people's behavior is, really. And then there's also just blind stinking luck, which is, can also be pretty damaging. So just be careful. I mean, we say all the time, I think I said this last night, Jeff, like everyone always says only spend what you can afford to lose on baseball cards. That's just a lie that we tell ourselves. Like we're all confident that none of this money is going to disappear. But I mean, a lot of money just disappeared in the last 24 hours, or not money, but a lot of value just disappeared for a lot of people in the last 24 hours. And it's probably not the last time it's going to happen, in the next 8 to 12 months. So just be very careful.
To answer your question, Scott, does it change how you invest or buy cards? Yeah, it does. And we've been repeatedly reminded that this isn't an issue that vintage collectors have to face. And I appreciate that. But I also really like collecting players that I can go and see and watch. So it is kind of a balancing act there. But my immediate reaction was I don't want to buy any new cards of any current player. And then I started making a checklist into my mind of which guys seem to be less risky, as Phil was talking about, people that don't have immediate red flags, people that are already have their legacy cemented. And so maybe I'm just going to try to focus more on that. And
there was a Redding Soto on eBay last night, BGS 9, I think. And Jeff and I were like talking about, we had some cash built up from some cards we sold, and we're like, we should take a run at this. But the Acuna injury just has us gun shy on pretty much any active player under 30.
Who's the player? Sorry, was it an Acuna? Who's
No,
the player Red Ink?
Soto Red Ink.
Soto, thank
Yeah.
you. Don't you own a Soto Red Ink?
We don't want to get into that. That's
Yeah.
one, but the less said about it, the better.
That's another story. Not
Oh.
a 9 for sure.
That's one of your horror stories.
Yeah.
I
But
don't know.
I do think Soto is one of the more reliable players out there to buy. But again, like we've said, it can go away quickly. And so if you don't want to just have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, you have to look around and see what your best options are.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, think about if the Yankees don't extend Soto and he goes to the Mets. I mean, I think all his cards take another hit.
temporarily. I think he could do well with the Mets in the long run. I do.
No one does well with the Mets in the long run.
I think he hits so well in that stadium and he hits so well in that division. I think it actually wouldn't be a horrible thing. It'd be horrible compared to the Yankees, but it's better than him staying with the Padres. I will say, though, whenever this happens, get ready for comments saying this is why I collect vintage. So get ready for that in the comments here. And if you collect vintage and that's your MO, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But sometimes the emotions that can be negative, how we're all feeling right now, it's just as much fun when it's positive. When Acuna had the 40-70 season, there's nothing more fun than when you feel like you're invested in not just the player, but the person and that performance. So it is interesting. I actually did sell some of my Mookies heading into this season. And I did it because I had all my eggs in one basket. I partially regret it because I love Mookie Betts and he had a great year so far. But at the same time, this could have been Mookie Betts too. And I'd have felt a lot worse if I'd have kept some of those cards. So it's just one of those things with be careful. It's not bad to have a couple good cards of a couple great players and just know what you're getting into. This is a reminder with the last few years of Julio, Tatis, Guerrero, and Acuna. Like, there's ups and downs with modern collecting. It can be brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts from you guys?
If you do still love Acuna and there's random stuff you're interested in, like some SSPs, some Ultra SSPs, some opening day, I bet get your eBay searches ready because you're probably going to have access to some cards you may never thought you would be able to afford before.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could be a good potential buying opportunity. You know, we could be looking back 20 years from now and saying that was the time, but also could not be. So just be careful either way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.